Hello and welcome to Godless Bitches 2.0. This episode has been pre-recorded, just so you know. This show aims to raise awareness of civil rights issues, progress and setbacks from the past and present, as well as a discussion of what we hope will be realized in the future. This show is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin. I have the three usual hosts, me, Clare Wuellner, Tracie Harris,
hey,
and Jen Peeples over there.
Hey, everybody.
Right on. And we have two special guests, Phil Session,
hi,
right there, and Adriana Buenaventura Martinez, who is remote, yes. And we are going to be talking about intersectionality. We did that on the show that aired June 1st, and we're going to do it again. We're going to talk about a different set of intersections in this one because there are lots of them. I would like to introduce our guests, and they both have a long list of accolades, so buckle up. It's good stuff. Adriana Buenaventura Martinez is a human rights and secular activist with a Master of Laws in International Legal Studies from American University. She is a fellow at the American Constitution Society and works for Hispanic American Freethinkers as a director. Adriana was awarded the 2018 O'Hare Scholarship by American Atheists. She has worked for American Atheists as a law clerk and was president of American University's Secular Student Alliance Group. So she started a while ago, which is wonderful. Adriana collaborates with several secular organizations in Colombia, including the Corporation for the Advancement of Reason and Secularism and Bogota Atheists Association. Her interests encompass the intersection between religious dogmas and human rights violations. She covers legislative and constitutional topics such as First Amendment issues in the U.S. and their equivalents in Colombia. So welcome, Adriana.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Right on. And then Phil Session.
Oh, just some random person that's just creeped into the
Some
studio.
random person who just won an award.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's right.
Yeah. No. Yeah, here he's got some stuff too. He was born and raised just outside of Dallas, Texas, in two church homes, one Baptist and the other a Free Church of God in Christ. After getting involved with the secular community in 2013, his efforts centered around volunteerism and community service projects, and that is the deepest truth there ever was said. That passion led him to organize and attend hundreds of volunteer activities in groups centered around non-belief in Austin and San Antonio over the past few years. Phil is the volunteer coordinator for Freethinkers Association of Central Texas and serves on its board of directors. He's also the head organizer and coordinator for Austin Atheists Helping the Homeless, and is a co-host for the live call-in show, The Atheist Experience, along with serving as producer for Godless Bitches 2.0.
Indeed.
So he's not actually on the other side of the wall today. He's in here with us.
Yeah.
Phil has made several guest appearances on the Raw Men podcast with Lalandra and Aaron Raw, Atheist Interviews. Arn. Sorry. Potato. Sorry. And the Recovering from Religion podcast. He also served as a lay leader at the Atheist Humanist meeting on Lackland Air Force Base. That's super cool.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that. That's neato. So these are our guests, and where shall we start?
Do we have a starting point?
So we're like, since this is our pre-recorded podcast and it's going to drop on the 15th, we're like 2 weeks away from the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots that kicked off basically the gay liberation movement. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and about civil disobedience and how oppressed people handle their oppression and stuff. And so right now we get a lot of people advocating for civility and, let's not be violent. Don't throw a milkshake upside somebody's head because, that's assault and all this stuff. So being civil and politely asking for our basic civil rights has never in the history of any civil rights movement worked, okay? It's always been about people basically going in and demanding, you're going to do this because I'm not going to let you get away with this crap anymore. And that's basically what happened with Stonewall. And the important thing to remember about Stonewall is that there were a lot of other riots that happened even before Stonewall. So Compton Cafeteria, and I think there was like the Daylight Donut Shop in Los Angeles, something like that. A lot of these things happened around this same time and a little before then. They were all violent confrontations with police because at the time, being gay was actually illegal. You could be taken to jail. And New York was really notorious for this. That's where the Stonewall Inn was. It was a gay hangout. It was actually owned by the Genovese crime family. So the mob paid the police to not raid the place, or at least if they were going to raid the place, to give them a tip-off that the raid was coming so they could prepare for it. And for those of you who don't know, the interior of this club, the walls were painted black. And so they had basically the lights going on. This is one of the few places where if you were gay, you could go and dance with someone of the same sex. And so what they would do is they would have the lights flashing and everything in there for the dance stuff. It was a very dark club. But if the police were at the door and they were about to be raided, they would turn the white lights on. That was everybody's signal to stop dancing and stop touching each other. Okay? And so police would come in. If you had ID, they'd check your ID and usually let you go. If you didn't have ID, you got arrested. Or if you refused to produce ID, you'd get arrested. If you were dressed, if you were wearing clothing of the opposite sex, you were probably going to get arrested. And it had some interesting rules. So, for example, women in the club had to be wearing at least 3 articles of female clothing in order to not get arrested.
Wow.
So,
count them at the door.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is the kind of crap. So I mean, for men in drag or transgender women or whatever, you were going to get arrested, and you were probably going to get the crap beat out of you. And so at some point, people had just had enough of this crap. And so on the morning of June 28th, 1969, the police raided the club. It was like 1:30 in the morning, and there's some dispute about whether the club was tipped off to it. Some people say that there was somebody who tried to tip them off, but it was later than the club usually got raided. They had an agreement with the police that if you're going to raid the club, raid it early in the evening, and then we'll pull out our spare bottles from under the bar and go right back to business. So this is 1:30 in the morning. It's later than usual. They basically dismissed the idea. But so the police showed up. They raided the club. And there's a lot of accounts of what happened, but the patrons there decided to fight back, and they drew a crowd outside. So this crowd, it continued to grow. And there was one woman, I guess a butch lesbian, who got handcuffed, and she fought back. And they were trying to load her into a paddy wagon, and she got away like 4 times. I think they finally hit her in the head with a club. God. But she yelled at the rest of the crowd, "Why don't you guys do something?" Right. And then the rest of the crowd started getting in on.
Got rowdy.
So basically, without telling the whole story here, essentially what happened was like two consecutive nights, and the crowd got bigger the second night.
Right.
But one of the things that happened was the drag queens and the trans women formed kick lines. So there's these riot police lining up in their billy clubs and the riot gear, ready to come at them, right? So in order to mock them and taunt them, the drag queens and the trans women formed kick lines, and they would sing songs and do their kick routine while these guys are lining up to beat them. And then, of course, when they'd surge forward to take them into custody or whatever, they'd start running. Mm-hmm. And so they were running down the streets with cops in chase, and the gay people, the LGBTQ people, kept looping back around through alleys and coming up behind the police and chasing the police. And so it ended up being kind of a mockery of the police.
Right.
So then the police would capture a bunch of people involved in this melee, and a group of other people would surge forward and recapture the gay people and pull them out of there. And so it went back and forth for a couple of days. Well, this set off the modern gay rights movement. And all of the groups before, there were a couple of other, they called them homophile organizations, that were all about presenting gay people as respectable, people just like heterosexual people. Don't be flamboyant, don't dress as a member of the opposite sex, don't do anything to provoke, the privileged class. Mm-hmm. They had a pretty low membership. After this, all of a sudden, every state had at least one homophile organization in it, and membership in these organizations surged. And so suddenly there was a lot of attention. One of the guys, I think it was Allen Ginsberg, who commented after the second night of the Stonewall riots. He was coming back from it, and he said that the men were just beautiful in there because they had lost that wounded look that they had had before, because suddenly they were fighting back. And so the message was, you can't do this shit to us anymore. So I think it's important when people are getting, all upset about politicians getting hit in the head with a milkshake. Let's keep in mind, this is Pride Month, and Pride started as a series of riots because we didn't have a choice. And so for people telling us, be civil and don't throw milkshakes, don't think you can just show up at Pride every year and call yourself part of the movement, because you're not.
Yeah, it's more than just showing up to Pride and waving around a flag to say that you're an ally, you understand. It's, what you do beyond that. Are you, actively helping those that are in these marginalized communities to try to better their circumstances? Are you, speaking out about the, trans ban that's happening on the military, or at least trying to get put in place there? It's your actions outside of that really demonstrate what being an ally is and what it means to you. And it's not a label that you necessarily put on yourself. It's your actions that you present to that marginalized community. And as they see you, then we can say that we recognize you. You are an ally. And thank you for supporting me and my community to help us rise up together on that side. But yeah, it's definitely more than just going to the parade and, getting some beads or something like that and going home.
Wear a fucking Pride shirt. Whatever,
So, Phil, in case people who are watching don't know, can you talk about your identities?
Oh, yes. Sure.
Because they may not know why what you just said is so very...
So, and I'm not sure, if somebody's watching this on a black and white screen, you may not know I'm African-American, cisgendered, gay atheist. Those are my identities that I hold. And it's interesting being, that triple minority. And there's even others that, even have more. Someone that's, a woman that can have those same type of thing. It's just, it's so much out there. And for me, it's a struggle for me to kind of, figure out, which attack. There's so many different things going on in the world and so many issues that are out there, affecting people of color, African Americans, affecting people that are atheists, non-believers, and the fact, it's hard for us to run for office because there's still all these preconceived notions that are out there. But also, even in, the gay rights movement, and I still call it a movement because some people interpret that, we got marriage. No, we're good. We're super golden.
You can serve in the military.
Yeah, and we're still fighting some stigma. There's a lot of states that are around that you could still be fired for being gay. There's no protections for that, for example. And it's just like we haven't bridged that gap yet where who I am can get me fired, and I don't have a lot of means of recourse to go against that individual, even if they said it outright that you're gay, this is exactly why we can't hire you. Yeah. Even if you're that direct.
Right. Yeah, it's legal.
You just, move about your business. And, Texas is not in a rush to try to change that around here. And in fact, a lot of states are working to kind of roll that back with the Religious Freedom Restoration Acts that are so prevalent around, that are just helping to, in the words of the proponents, propel religious freedom and your freedom to express your religion. even if that comes at the cost of discriminating against marginalized communities or just those that you don't agree with your sincerely held beliefs and stuff like that. And so it's definitely interesting having all these things. It's like, where do you start first? Where do you start with, police brutality and the fact that the criminal justice system has so many, it's disproportionately affecting people of color on that side. How can we, where do you start? And so it's always been a challenge for me and my different identities that are there. And it's just, it's very...
Well, and I mean, the label of this series that we did, like the last episode and this episode, is intersectionality, right?
Yes.
And so you can talk about these things and say, this is how this impacts me on this level with this identity. This is how this impacts me with this level on this identity. But the fact is, those identities are always integrated for you, right? Like you're never, you don't, when you're talking about the experience of being Black, it doesn't mean you don't set aside the fact that you're gay. You don't set aside the fact that you are atheist. You know what I mean? It's like these other things don't just go away. It's like you still have those other identities. And so I guess my question is, as somebody that's got these intersections, right, that are important because of social emphasis, right? I mean, you can't just ignore it. It's like something that's going to come at you socially all the time. So you don't have the luxury of ignoring your race like I do, right? I can ignore my race because no one's going to care, right? But when you're going through life, you have to navigate being Black. You have to navigate being gay, which is an identity that you have that people don't know, right? So you walk up to somebody, they don't know you're gay, but they know you're Black, right? You walk up and they see you're Black and they don't know what your religious views are. And so my question would be, when you integrate with these other communities, how do your identities contribute and also conflict when you're negotiating these different things in one area or another? Like when you go to Pride and you're Black, when you go to an atheist community and you're gay or Black, when you go to a Black meetup and you're also an atheist and also gay, like what does that mean?
You definitely understand that, like if I go to somewhere that's predominantly African American, a meetup or a party or whatever else, and there's all these folks here, and they may know that I'm atheist or may not, but that's still, it has an impact because if it comes to it's time for the food, and then here's let's form a circle and everybody take hands and let's get ready to do this prayer. All of a sudden, I'm just like, okay, I'll join hands, but I'm not, I won't, I'll keep my eyes open. I'll be respectful of your practice, but it lets me know that I am not, that's not something that's really accepted in that community, and still one of those odd things.
It puts you on puts you on the margin.
Yeah,
that's why they call it marginalizing people, right? It puts you on the outside of the dominant group in that case.
Yeah, and it's definitely, it's visible. It's there, and I know it, and and most of the time, you're interacting or playing cards. It's something that doesn't come up until it does, and then it's that reminder that this other identity of mine, the fact that I'm an atheist, and the fact that so many people in this group don't favor that. They look at it with disdain. And they look at it as something that needs to be fixed or something's wrong with you. Whether they actually say it outright or not depends on the individual, but it's definitely sitting out there. Going to Pride, I've been fortunate in a lot of the prides that I've gone to. I've gone with friends and a lot of them who are people of color up in Dallas and even down in San Antonio. There's a lot of diversity that I see, but it still is, predominantly white on that side. But it seems like things are getting better. Same thing with the atheist community as a whole, even though I do see definitely some issues that I see in it. As I look around, when I go to atheist conventions, when I go to atheist meetups, it's definitely, notice, the color difference that's there. And it still is an issue. And I know that it makes some people uncomfortable to actually talk about that, hey, this is still a thing that's there. When we look around and see that there's go to a big convention, so American Atheists or whatever else, and you don't really see a lot of your people represented there.
Right, you're not modeled. Right. There's nobody there modeling you, and that's important.
And it makes, even though I still want to go, but it does make me realize that, wow, it's still got a long way to go. Number one, this is not a closed issue, but it's also for people that are not as willing to jump out there necessarily as I am, how do they view this? If they see this and like, do I even belong here?
Right.
Is this even a place for me?
Right.
For example. And I wanted to bring up a small thing. I think I spoke about it with you on the way back from Oklahoma.
Okay.
Oh, goodness. On the way back. But
Which was a fun drive.
that was a fun drive. So, I went to a convention. Me and Tracie and I went to a convention last year, an atheist convention, and things were good for the most part. But there were several instances that occurred during this convention that, kind of made me step back a little bit and kind of re-examine things just a bit. But in this case, there were 3 instances during this convention where someone felt the need. I had a ponytail at the time, but somebody felt the need or they felt that they had permission and that it was okay to pull my hair as a means of getting my attention, for example.
What?
But
And let me just alert people too that there's an additional trope here, which is like that there are a lot of my friends who are black who will express, and you can find articles online if you want more information, the idea of how offensive it can be for people to say, "Can I touch your hair?"
Yeah.
Right? So in addition to just being rude to walk up and pull somebody's hair, there's an additional racist component that folks might want to be aware of, that touching somebody's hair when they're black or asking if you can touch or feel their hair is really, really not cool.
Yeah, it's
FYI.
Yeah, it was.
The number of instances of people that touched or pulled my hair at the conference was 0.
Right.
Yeah.
But we had that conversation on the way home because Tracie was kind of sitting in disbelief, like what, what the hell are people thinking? But it was something that happened. Like I said, it happened 3 times during this particular convention over the course of those 2 and some change days that we were there. And the first time it happened, it was from somebody that, I knew, that I liked, I knew them very well, but it's something that didn't necessarily cross their mind as this might be something offensive to do. For them, it was just, I'm just getting your attention, hey, how are you, type of thing. But they were not cognizant that it's another layer for me that, I do get that a lot of time. The question of can I touch your hair, especially when my fro is out. It doesn't matter if the fro is out, if it's just like flattened or something like that. Whatever it is, it's like this mystical thing that's just like sitting on my head here and there.
It beckons us.
Just like, but I'm glad to get
siren hair.
Like, I have 0 problems getting compliments on it, like, oh wow, your hair looks so amazing. And I'm just like, I appreciate that. But then when the hand kind of accompanies that, it's just like, oh dear, I don't know where you've been.
Just think about it. I don't care who you are. Somebody reaching up to touch your hair is an incredibly intimate act. Incredibly.
Yes, thank you. And it's like, you have blue hair.
Right.
Awesome.
It looks amazing.
But
Thank you.
I don't think I've ever touched your hair.
No, you've managed to restrain yourself.
So you can go through life and not touch somebody's hair.
Yeah, but we had a conversation about it, and I told her kind of my perspective as to how I viewed that action, and they had honestly no idea. They looked just kind of blindsided, like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And we hugged it out right there in the middle of this huge traffic flow that we were a part of, and from that action, that's how I consider them to be an ally, because, we had to understand that we talked about it, they apologized, and I don't believe that they would probably ever do that action again. I would hope not, especially not to me. That's for doggone sure. But, but they were willing to talk and learn about this and really realize that there's another layer that they were not aware of that applies because they're not they don't have my minority status. They're not an African American. That's not something that they experience. And so it was a learning experience for them. And I was like, all right.
So the apology you were talking about, there's a right way and a wrong way to apologize when you've crossed that boundary.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about that, please?
It's if they, like the way that we had our conversation, they were sincere, they were respectful, they were listening almost the entire time, really trying to get a handle on to what, they still had that shocked look, but they were really understanding and receptive to my experience and the way that I viewed this, even though I recognized that they meant no harm by it. They didn't mean to do something that some might consider to be racist, but we were still having a conversation so that they get educated. And so when they apologized, it was unequivocal. It was, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I will never do that. I am so it was overly sincere. It was amazing, and I love the fact that they did have that reaction, because when you get someone that they do that. So the third instance, for example, was somebody I didn't know at all. And when that happened, you're right, didn't know them, didn't meet them at all. At a random person that was an attendee apparently. And when that happened, it was just, I was taken so far aback. Like, it's one thing if you know me and it's just like we had a conversation, but this random person that didn't know me, and even for the first person I talked to, if they were defensive about it, like, I didn't mean any harm about it. I didn't, it wasn't my
I'm not a racist.
It wasn't my intent.
How could you call me a racist?
Right. It's if you're acting like that, you're not being receptive to the experience that I'm trying to relate to you and how this made me feel and why I'm angry. Even though I tried to remain calm, I remained, everything else. But for that third person that did it, it's so weird to talk about it in that term. Like, third person, third time this happened at this one event. They were just this random person, and I'm just saying hi. And we had some words. It was just one of those things. Like, what the hell? What's wrong with you? And they were completely cut off. They were completely defensive and just walked off kind of in a huff at the whole thing, rather than trying to acknowledge that, hey, I probably shouldn't go up and touch, pull on someone's hair that I don't know, I've never met personally, don't know their last name.
Well, that brings up the issue of entitlement, right?
Right.
Like, I it's okay if I touch your hair.
Yeah.
Why are you getting offended at
it.
me?
Yeah.
And it's like, so it has no respect or regard for the person that you've just gone and violated, right? And it doesn't matter if it's a big violation, a small violation. I mean, it's like, the point is, you're not entitled to touch somebody else's hair. You're not entitled to go up and grab someone's hair and pull it. It's not cool. And if you get all upset when they tell you they don't like it, what the hell? What is that, right? And the thing to do, like you were talking about before, it's like, man, the first thing to do when you realize you've crossed that boundary is fall on the sword, right? Just get your sword out and just fall right on it for the person. And then you say to them, you let them know you're sorry, that you realize you crossed a boundary. You don't know what that is, but you're happy to find out. Right? And
I care enough
want to
about
hear
you
it
to find
because
out.
you don't want to do it again. And the most important thing here is that I understand what your boundaries are and that I don't do this to you again, and let me know when I can take the sword out.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
And I do want to get Adriana into this conversation because she's been real patient so far.
I do want to say one more thing about apology, and I want to do it now before we go off. I'm sorry, Adriana, because it bears on this. The other thing that I've seen people do, and I've been told is awful, is turning the misdeed into all about me. Yeah. So I touch your hair, and you say that's not cool, and I go, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, I just and just like, and you wind up comforting me over the fact that I did something wrong.
It's okay.
Yeah, and as I understand it, pronouns are one of those areas where people over apologize. Just apologize and move on. It's not up to the other person to say, oh, it's okay. It's not okay. Just move on. Okay, Adriana.
All right. So for Adriana, what I want to ask, so we reached out to you. Apparently, you have this great resume, but I was only aware of. I was looking for somebody from the Hispanic Freethinkers because they have been cool enough to be on the show in the original podcast, and so I would like to put kind of the same question to you about your identities, your intersectionality, and why it's important to you, and what you hear from your community about why it's important and how these identities crisscross.
Sure. Thank you, Tracie, for the question. And I think my identity and being intersex is something that is intrinsically who I am. So I cannot live one part of my life without another one. And unfortunately, as a Hispanic, I think about, and also because I have an accent, which I don't think I will ever lose, I have been discriminated against. for in many situations, but also within the secular community. I have had volunteer for other organizations, and I didn't feel the treatment or people being nice with other humanists or other seculars that were involved in the situation. And the first situation I would like to refer is a volunteer I did for an organization during a summer camp. And it was a great experience, and I was super excited. It was the first time I was volunteering for an organization in the US, and it was this 1 week during summer 2016 that you have to leave everything aside and ask permission in your work to go to these cabins in the woods. And it was expected for me to take care of or to put an eye on the adolescents. So I will be in charge of taking care of girls between 14 and 17 years old. And, teenagers are horrible. And that was kind of understandable. But what I was feeling that I didn't belong to the community was when it was adult time and you were supposed to socialize with other adults after bedtime. I was definitely like going to the main kitchen or living room, and everyone was there, but I didn't feel welcome. No one would speak with me or even like including me in the conversation. It was a stupid thing. It wasn't like a real activity that we will doing, but definitely I didn't feel welcome, and that was kind of sad because you are expecting a different behavior from your fellow humanists and people that understand that we come from different backgrounds and we have to be create community and be respectful and welcome to people. I remember that my boyfriend was telling me that maybe it was another aspect. Maybe it was that I wasn't being discriminated against for being Latina or for being different, especially for my accent, which sometimes made people uncomfortable, or the conversation maybe doesn't flow. Is not that fluent, but I think that could be an explanation too. He was telling me at that time, probably because they were really good friends and it was their community. Those are people that have been attending that camp for 3 or 4 years, so they know each other really well, and that could be an explanation too. But anyways, if we say that we are this strong community with a different values and that we are humanists and we understand again that we come from different backgrounds, I would have expected a different behavior. That was like the first time I really had a bad time with people from my own community. But it wasn't like a racist attitude by the organization itself. It was only the people and the administrators that were there, and it was their free time and they didn't want to spend it with me. So I moved on, and that didn't discourage me from keep working in the secular community. And I have been wonderful times doing a bunch of other activities and collaborating with many other organizations, including Half Free, but also American Atheists and Secular Student Alliance. In 2017, I was at school. I was finishing my master in human rights and gender at American University, and I realized that we didn't have a secular group. We had one in 2014 when I came to the US, and I gathered with them. But now that I was at school, we didn't have one. So I felt the necessity of putting that community together. So I started looking for other people within the university, among students, to bring this group to life. And again, I was in this uncomfortable situation in which the original group of people that were interested in being part of this lately started behaving in a different way, and they didn't respond my messages. I was the main organizer, and at that point I had spent like a year trying to put the group together, but I missed the initial deadline with the student fair, so you have like a direct contact with students. So I kept trying to create different meetings, but I didn't have any attendance for like 3 or 4 meetings. No one came. But again, I keep trying, and eventually a group of people were interested in being part of the community. So because I was leaving and I didn't want to be the president, because that disrupt the group's dynamic, and then you have to hold elections and many other things. But in conclusion, I didn't want to be the president, and I appointed someone else. And I was trying to put the constitution and the bylaws and everything together for the group to move forward. But again, they started like ignoring my messages, having problems to communicating with me, even in writing when I was sending them messages or assigning activities to do. They weren't responsive, and they didn't let me know what was going on. Again, these were teenagers. Most of them were sophomores, I will say. So really young people, friend among each other. So probably they felt also that was their project, or they were in a better position of being the leaders of the group. Again, exploring that the idea for that to happen could have been a different situation than to be discriminated against, but it is one of the explanations I find. And again, the way I speak maybe could make them feel that I wasn't worth it of being like the main leader of the camp. But again, what I did was to thank them because they were interested in the conversation and inviting them to be part of the community. But I moved forward, and I found other people that were easy to work with. And eventually we put the group together and we registered it. And now we have a group at American University. I graduated last December 2018, so I'm no longer an active member of the group, but I still collaborated with them. And you just have to keep moving and keep going. So yeah, I will say that those has been the most like difficult times I have had with the secular community. But again, and now I have another project. I will be representing half free the work I have done with American Atheists and my experience putting communities together at the Secular Student Alliance conference coming in July. It will be in LA, and I will be there talking about my experience as a Hispanic atheist living in the US and putting these communities together. So you have to keep moving and keep working in what you believe.
What are the types of things that you would look for, or that you think people could do differently, that you're saying you felt excluded, you tied this to your identity as a Hispanic woman, and what types of things would somebody look for? Like if I was guilty of doing something that was making you feel excluded for those identities, what does that look like, as opposed to me just saying, well, maybe I just don't like Adriana, right? Maybe we just have a personality clash. So when you're looking at it from your perspective, you look at it and you see this and you identify it as something that's tied more to race because of what? Like what clues you in?
Okay. I think I have seen the answers for that question in a lot of the different shows that you have done in the past. Mm-hmm. And it's basically let people speak. Take it seriously. if in the Camp Quest situation, if I had to the necessity to express how was my experience, I needed someone to take time to listen to what I was saying. Then they will decide if I was wrong or whatever, but they need to put aside whatever they are doing and first listen to the person and respect the way that person feels and feel what saying something about that is like, if you did something wrong or the other person perceived as a transgression and you are trying to make your point that the other person is defensive, we aren't going anywhere.
Okay.
So,
when you try to raise the issue, you're saying like for example with Phil, if he tries to say, hey, this is not cool, and it's especially not cool, I'm not saying that Phil even brought up the idea of race in that, but so he did. so Phil says it's not cool, it's especially not cool because I'm black, right? And this is like a racist thing that people do. And what you're saying is when somebody brings that up to you and they say, hey, I'm thinking that there might be some racist component to this, and the other person just shuts that down instead of hearing you, that's when you start to wonder even more that this might be a racist thing. Is that a fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that kind of picking back off of what Adriana was saying, I felt very included in a lot of the circles that I've dealt with down in San Antonio with FACT, up here in Austin with all the people that I've gotten to interact with and the community service and everything else that I've been involved with. But I think, going to your question of what do those good experiences look like of, when people are really valuing you, all of you, not just the atheist part of you. I think part of that comes when I come to a situation like this, or I come here, I can't leave my minorities at the door. Like it's not just that I'm an atheist, but I have these experiences as being a gay man, raised, in Texas, as being an African American male, as having a family dynamic that being gay and being atheist has an effect on, and that informs my outlook of how I view others and the interactions that people have, like when I go to conventions and everything else. I watch things and I watch how people have those actions, but when I see people that are really valuing me as who I am, like Adriana said, having a voice when I are in saying something or saying that I'm having an issue with something, that you're actually listening to what it is I'm saying, that I'm not necessarily pushing off to the side, disregarding it, and saying that, well, that's not really the important thing that we're doing here. But it is important to me because I can't leave my other minority statuses at the door when I walk into your conference.
I'm having a mind explosion here. Sometimes it doesn't take much for me, right? I'm just going to say this may seem small to some folks, but this was like a big epiphany that I just had while you were talking, right? Mm-hmm. And what Adriana was saying, you kind of bounced off it. And it's really racist to say, can you just be an atheist here and just leave your black crap at home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
exactly
horrendous, right? I mean, I've understood the concept of the person comes in and they don't just leave their identities at home, but I've never really thought about the impact of somebody literally messaging to you either overtly or covertly or knowingly or unknowingly that, hey, I'm not really interested in this other stuff about you that affects you negatively, that hurts you as a person, that, leads to all these, discriminatory things that you have to deal with all the time. I just don't give a crap. Can you just be an atheist and not be black?
Yeah. And that's it happens in the online world, when people they join groups or something like that, and a topic will be discussed that talks about something with people of color or with being LGBT, some issue that crops up, and somebody will come back and say, well, that's not what we do here. That's not what this group is about on this side. And it's like, well, that's maybe an atheist, but that's a part of my experience, and this is something.
It's part of your package.
It's something that's worth it, and if it's not even worth it for you to even hear or consider, it's fine if you don't want it. You don't have to engage. We all have our own things. You have your own lives. Go live your life. It's all great, but don't say that you shouldn't be discussing that here. That's not the forum for you to express this piece of yourself. I only want to talk about this other side on that. So if you have something to say about your atheism, cool. Otherwise, I'm not here for all the rest. And it's like, if you feel that way, gravy, but that's maybe something you should consider keeping to yourself.
Disrespectful to the person, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you disrespected the person. And there was an interesting thing that Mandisa brought up that I want to make sure we hit, because this is, and this was the last episode we had Mandisa on, and she talked about the idea of how slaves were brought to the U.S. and then it became a black identity, right? There wasn't really black identity. There were a lot of disparate cultures that were brought here from a lot of different nations and a lot of different regions. But when they came to the U.S., they were just looked at from the outside as black, right? These are black people, these are slaves. And so then what happened was you ended up over time, there became this a concept of an American black identity, right? Because everybody had been stripped of their cultures, like brought here, and it just kind of was erased. And then what Adriana was talking about earlier, when we were talking a little bit before the show, and she said, I'm from Colombia, and I said, whoa, we got the same thing going on here, right? So right now we have a lot of people that are coming in and immigrating to the U.S. from a lot of different contexts and cultures. And I mean, people are just looking at it like coming across the border from Mexico, we got these Hispanics coming in and they're Hispanic, right? Or they're even calling them all Mexicans.
That's
right?
exactly.
Like, it doesn't matter where you're from, you're just Mexican because you came across the Mexico border. I don't care where, what else your context is. But it made me, stop and think. So you've got the same situation that Mandisa was describing last episode of all these different cultural identities that are moving together, that are coming in here. And when you get here, you're just the Hispanic demographic, right? I mean, that's it. Or the Latino or Latina demographic.
Yeah.
And so I guess from my perspective, being from Colombia and coming here and then being kind of grouped in with this, with people that had a totally different cultural experience than you and just being looked at in this weird homogenous way. What is that like, Adriana?
My experience is a little bit different. I came here to go to school. So I has been busy since. I didn't have a lot of time to be involved in events or whatever from my Colombian community. But what I have seen is that creates that idea of being an immigrant and represent all these rapists, things, and drug dealers, Colombian. That creates a breakout within the community itself. And then you have a lot of people, Mexicans or Colombians that are already here saying, they shouldn't be allowed. They shouldn't receive more people. In Latin America is having such a bad time, so they shouldn't be allowed to enter the country. So I think the impact that that rhetoric has had within the culture and the community and how you feel as an immigrant, especially from Latin American countries, the damage is really deep.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. And there's just so... The only thing, and it's just so weak, I would never compare it, but I remember doing a thread on one of my social media sites where I talked about the lie of the American experience, right? There's this concept of this American experience, and it's these particular cars and a particular mom and dad dad wears a suit and goes to work, and everyone goes to church on Sunday, and they've got the 2-3 kids, and
they're always
dog,
white,
and they're white, and and so you've got, and mom always looks like a pinup model, and and so here was the thing, that was the American experience, and then you had shows like Happy Days, right, where it was there it was right there on screen, and it was interesting to me as somebody who, like I say, I said on the last episode, my grandparents came here, immigrated from Italy, right? And so I have this part Italian, part, this American experience. My dad grew up in Midwest farm country, and so I've got these two very different cultures that are, part of my household where I grew up. And so for me, the American experience was a lot of lasagna and homemade pizzas. And, it had nothing to do with hot dogs. I mean, I like hot dogs, okay, but this was just like, I mean, it was such a different thing. And I was kind of like, and so people started to hit that thread. And some people were like, yes, I'm like Chinese American. And this was, it's like, I totally, my friends that are like the white bread, regular, that iconic American experience, they just don't quite, they think it's really weird. They come to my house and we're eating with chopsticks and then you have like somebody else that, chimes in and they're just like, oh my gosh, yeah, my family's Armenian. And we, and so there was like all these people that were hitting that thread and talking about their experiences and how they felt, and I'm like, the beauty of what the country is supposed to be is that it's supposed to be a diverse set of immigrant cultures that came here. And I say this, understanding the impact on the native cultures, like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that was an awesome start to anything, and it's still not awesome, and I'm not condoning any of that. That's a whole other issue that, yes, we can talk about. But right now, the concept of, the current system is supposed to be that, open to immigration, open to diversity, that there's strength from the many one, not just for states, but for diversity of people. Right? Like this idea of bringing it all together. And yet there's still somehow in all this huge batch of people that do not have this iconic American experience, somehow that myth prevails. Yeah. And people still talk about it like it actually existed as like a thing, and it might have for a few people, but it wasn't definitely universal. Everybody. Yeah, and all of the people that are marginalized, like people that were gay, they didn't grow up in that blissful existence. And so I'm looking at this thing, but every now and then somebody would hit the thread and they would just be like, but that is the American experience. And and it's like, yeah, no, that's your experience, right? Like that's your American experience. That's not my American experience. Am I not an American? Am I not a U.S. citizen? Which usually I try to use U.S. citizen. I avoid saying American, but it becomes like a thing because I like to remind people that when people come here from Central and South America, they're Americans too. Yes. Right? So U.S. citizens have disparate context and stuff, and by saying that there is this one, you're literally dismiss the history and the experience of everybody else, like in a gigantic way. And it was just interesting to see how some of the folks were like, well, but like how do these demographics, like how much of that demographic has to be, included to be an experience for, and it's like, oh, come on. Anybody's experience is the quote American experience. It's like, it's not like a thing where you hit a threshold and now your experience is an American experience. If you're living in this country, you're having an American experience right now. Right. And so it's just so bizarre to me how dismissive, I guess, the whole thing is.
Yeah. Well,
I don't get it either.
I'm sure you don't.
I don't get it. Then when I criticize or let's say pointed out what is wrong or why I don't feel that way or why I think that people should be interested in knowing Trump's tax report or that we do in Colombia, people again see me as there is she again complaining about something. These atheists never are happy with anything, and are the same tools that allow me to be critical about religion and other million topics. I apply them to the reality and how people that aren't in that position, that don't have the awesome jobs that they are supposed to have or access to health. Colombia is having a bad time, but you guys are really, really with a bunch of topics too. And we have health in Colombia. It won't be the best system, but at least you have health and maternity leave or many other things. So when I'm talking with my friends and they are like, oh, but don't know, I will have a kid here and he will be an American and I will have the papers or whatever they are talking about. It's like, really? You will give birth and then go back to work like the next day? You don't know how it is. And if they advertise it in a different way or ads or internet and the models or the idea of family that you were describing before doesn't apply to you. You should be aware of that and make the decision according to that too.
Yeah, that's not how everybody's living. Exactly.
Yeah, that's that kind of issue of not, I guess, wanting to acknowledge the experience of other. It came up once there was a traffic stop that happened. So it was somebody that recorded themselves on Facebook Live or something getting pulled over by a police officer. And so, the police officer came and, took the stuff and whatever else. And I guess I gave a ticket. But the point at the end of the video was that, if you are respectful and you do all these right things, well, this is how police stops will go for you as long as you do that. And that may be the case for, a lot of people that get stopped, but it's still, there's enough experience that I've heard about in my community that I've seen on TV or whatever else that if I get pulled over, there are some additional checks that go through my mind, like where are my hands? Right. Where's my ID? Let me have everything at the ready right here, in here. Let me make sure that I'm, talking clearly, talking eloquently, trying to make a good impression to make sure that I'm not perceived as a threat or something like that. It's a different experience on that side. And so when a Facebook friend of mine commented back and was kind of parroting what the guy was talking about in the video, I'm just like, this, you're not even here. And I went through the trying to explain it and went in great detail, but his impression was just, oh no, that's, we're just going to agree to disagree or something along those lines. And I'm like, there's a whole wath of experience that you don't have. It's not even in your ballpark. And even if you see it in front of you or you see other people talking about it, it's not even a willingness to listen to people that have a very different experience that you do to even understand where they're coming from in the first place.
Meanwhile, I can be a total smartass in a traffic stop and, just get my ticket and go.
About your business.
I won't even be pulled out of the car, And I'll tell you a story. I was actually in college. So I was going to school in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was legitimately speeding, okay? So I get pulled over by the cop. He's writing me the ticket, and in the course of writing me the ticket, for whatever reason, he asked me, "Ma'am, are you a student?" And I'm like, "Why, do I get a student discount?" And so he wasn't very amused, but he didn't pull me out of the car and take me to jail for that, Whereas, a black guy who got in exactly the same situation, that might have been a very different experience. Right. You probably would not have said that to him.
This does remind me of something. When Adriana's talking about awareness, like being aware how you're going to be treated, and you're talking about awareness, like I need to be aware of how I come off to this cop. I need to be aware of where my hands are. I need to be aware of what might threaten him in a way that doesn't threaten him if he pulls Jen over.
Sure.
And so there's this kind of self-consciousness that's required when you're marginalized, right? You have to constantly be self-conscious of how other people are viewing you, especially when the marginalization is coming from the society, when it's not me identifying as Italian American because I think it's nice, when it's like me identifying as something that is being discriminated against. I have to be aware of how other people are going to react to that. And I wish I would have thought of this last episode when Serafina was on, because I had a conversation with someone who was talking about it, and they were saying, you understand, right, as a trans woman, I have to defend my existence and my right to be 1,000 times a day. And I wrote back and I was like, I've tried to wrap my brain around what life is like, because like you're talking about, you're driving down the road, all is cool, then a cop stops you, and then suddenly that red flag goes up and you have to start thinking, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, and what does that mean? And for me, when I was younger, and I would walk by a crowd of particular types of groups of men and think to myself, is this okay? Is someone going to say something to me? Is someone going to slap my ass? Am I going to get touched inappropriately? And do I just have to keep my head down and keep walking if that happens and just hope they stop and that this doesn't escalate? Or if I ignore them, are they going to be like, hey, what's the matter, you snobby bitch? You're too good for us. You can't say hello. Why don't you smile, right? Like this aggressiveness that I would fear. And sometimes I'd walk past and nothing would happen, and then I'd feel relieved. And sometimes I'd walk past and something would happen, and I would just want to get away from it. And I was trying to explain it to, a friend of mine who is like cishet white male, and I was just like, you might have had this experience, like if you're walking down the street and you pass, like a group of people that maybe, seems kind of gangish or something, right? Where you might feel unsafe, or you might, if your car breaks down in a neighborhood and it's not the safest part of town, you might feel uncomfortable getting out and just walking down to the corner store to use the phone, right? It's like this sort of threat feeling where you have to be really hyper aware. And for a trans woman, and it was interesting because one of my trans man friends said to me that, he was just like, well, I pass, I pass. Right. I go out and I pass. I'm shaving. It's like, but he was just like, with trans women, it gets worse because a lot of trans women don't pass. And so when they're walking around in society, literally what my friends are posting, what my trans women friends are posting are stories about, this person thought that it was okay to just stare me down as I went through the food court at the mall. Or this person thought it was okay to say some crap to me or make some nasty comment. And sometimes it's like a nice comment, right? Like I saw one where somebody actually offered a supportive comment to a trans woman friend. And she said, while I felt kind of good about getting supported, but I felt really bad because it reminded me that I don't pass. And that was important to this particular person. And so there are all these things that they have to think about, that when they're walking into a bathroom, when they're just walking down the street, because they are identified, they are vilified, they are treated like garbage. And people think it's okay to do that. And we were talking at the last episode about how that trans woman who was murdered was also, like it was like a week before or something like that, where she was beaten by a mob in broad daylight, screaming homophobic slurs at her. And so you have this thing where the whole society is just brutally violently against you, and you have to go out and shop. You have to go to the grocery store.
Because and you have to live.
You have to go out and live. Right?
I was like, her whole life is that 30 seconds where I walk past that group of guys and I feel unsafe. She feels unsafe all the freaking time. All the time. And you can't walk around with that kind of threat feeling and that hyper awareness and that hyper self-consciousness and being in fear all the time and be okay. It has a toll on your mental health. It has a toll on your physical health, right? Like this is how people end up with PTSD.
Exactly.
And some folks are just like, oh no, that's just military people. No, it's not. No, it has to do with long-term stress reactions. And when you look at like the mental and the physical toll that oppression and marginalization takes on people, you will understand why oppression and marginalization are violence against people and why they respond violently, which is what you were talking about earlier, because it is literally self-defense.
Right. And that's one of the things I wanted to bring up was about this whole milkshaking thing. So a milkshake is not a threat. It's not an actual threat of physical harm, okay? What it does... And I want to bring up this article that Tracie mentioned. It's in The Atlantic. And the title of the article is called "Sometimes a Milkshake is Just a Milkshake."
Yeah, written by a Secret Service agent.
Yeah. And so basically, if someone throws a milkshake at someone, you could construe that as an assault. But the intent is not to actually hurt someone.
Yeah.
What it does for a marginalized person to throw a milkshake or do something like that is that it pierces this perception of invulnerability that certain people have, that they move through life feeling like they can do things to other people and no one can do something to them. A milkshake, a penny, a frappuccino.
Right. Glitter bomb.
A glitter bomb, a water bottle, or a water bomb, water balloon. Those kinds of things, they're not a gateway drug to a Molotov cocktail, okay?
Right.
What it does is it shatters that illusion that these people have that they are invulnerable, that nothing bad is going to happen to them. And for a split second, they might experience a little bit of the uncertainty in life that they inflict on other people.
All the time.
All the time. And it's an important tool for marginalized people. I am not going to criticize somebody for throwing a milkshake or a water balloon or glitter or whatever. You know, it's not a brick.
Well, he brings his experience as a former Secret Service person to the table. And one of the things he says is it's been his job to assess threats. And what he's saying is if somebody throws a cold coffee, they're out to ruin your suit and annoy you. If somebody throws a hot coffee, look out. That's a person that wants to hurt you.
Right.
So it's about looking at it and assessing it. In Texas, we have a thing where we put people on trial and we assess committing a crime with an unloaded gun, the same as we do a loaded gun. I think that is totally wrong.
Yeah.
The person with the unloaded gun clearly is not intending to kill somebody if things go south. The person with the loaded gun will potentially they've sent a message that they might be willing to kill somebody if things go south.
Yeah.
Totally different level of threat, like completely different.
Yeah.
We
But
are running out of time.
do you go against that feeling of the society saying like, oh, you should be better than that? And let me give you an example. Do you remember the controversy around public officials and the speaker of the White House going to different restaurants and they were harassed while they were eating or refused service? And I remember that the discourse was also like, oh, we should be better than they are. So we shouldn't go, when they go low, we go high.
Yeah.
So how can we go against that too? If, as you were saying, the idea is that the change happened because we are tired of what is going on and we do something about it.
Yeah, because they can't exist. It's like what Serafina was talking about in the last episode. You can't, when it reaches a point where you can't exist marginalized anymore, where you're looking at like, I'm going to put a gun to my head or I'm going to throw a milkshake at somebody. And I think that my sympathy has to lie with the person, and I will tell them, if you have to throw a milkshake at me, throw a milkshake at me, because I'd rather see that than you put a bullet through your head.
Exactly.
And with that, we have to
end,
wrap.
but I want to give our guests one last chance to say anything that they feel like they haven't gotten out there. Adriana, you want to go first?
Sure. I definitely want to leave the program today with a positive message that has been my experience. Maybe if I will be part of this program a year from now, I don't know what I will say, but right now I think the atheist community is working really hard to be a good ally and to create spaces and to be in touch with other organizations fighting many different battles. And let me give you an example. As part of my job as American Atheist, again, and Hispanic American free thinkers, I have been part of different coalitions meetings with the National Center for Transgender Equality, SICAs working in sex education, other organizations working in family planning and access to education. And that allows me to take a look at a different point of view in which these other organizations are looking to the atheist community as an ally to put together a work together to attend certain issues. And definitely we have been behind writing testimonies and comments for federal rulemaking, for the Department of Education or Human Services, fighting all those issues. And also that relationship has made us part of their agenda. And I remember the example of the Equality Act that just passed in the House like 2 weeks ago. That the original draft they had was to secure equality and for transgender fellows in different scenarios, and the language they were using, it was only avoiding discriminations based on gender or sexual orientation, and they include religion too. That wasn't part of the idea they have at the beginning. And Alison Gill, who is the Vice President of Legal Issues at American Atheists, got invited to the hearing at the House, So is a symbiotic relationship in which we go outside, we try to ask people. When I'm attending briefings for other organizations, I always approach them and ask them if they think about us as a good ally for the fight they are doing. And that has become a good dynamic that will allow us to do our job better as a secular community, interested and worry about how we live and how can we better humans, but also how those organizations can support us too.
Fantastic. Phil?
Yeah, I'll definitely piggyback off of that just a little bit, but there's a lot of outreach. There's so many different atheist communities out there, atheist organizations that are out there, and some are doing a lot of work to reach out to other smaller atheist groups that may focus on a particular minority group, stuff like that, and that's awesome. But I think, considering just the makeup of a lot of the larger conferences, it's illustration that there's still a lot of reaching out and work that needs to be done on that side. And, reaching out to these smaller atheist communities or minority groups and, trying to build them up and amplify their voices in the atheist community as, being intersectional in their identities. They have so many different ones, and one just happens to include being atheist, and that informs their experiences, and those experiences are worth hearing because you get to hear something that's you're not exposed to all the time, that maybe you don't understand or even understand is a problem at all that is being faced. And so my take on it is to as atheist organizations, as organizers or leaders in your own local groups, to try to reach out and amplify those other voices. And I'm wearing my lovely Black Non-Believer shirt here, of course. But there's the conference coming up in October 4th through the 6th is the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference out in Chicago, Illinois, and it will be one of the first. I guess it may be one of the first that features all speakers that are women of color, for example. And, going out to support that, going out to learn something, donating to, and actually showing up at that conference and showing how you are an ally to this group that, you're not a part of, that you may not necessarily know all the ins and outs of, and definitely don't know the extent of their experiences on subjects. Those are the type of things, when we talked earlier about your actions signify whether you're deemed an ally or not. Those are the type of things that really come to the forefront. How are you supporting these minority groups that are in your community, but also have other communities of their own, around the margin, as Tracie put it earlier. So that's my big takeaway. And the other small thing I'll add in is, when you're asking, someone that's in a marginalized group to explain something to you, if you are going that route and they feel comfortable doing so, awesome. But not everyone, as Tracie talked about, Serafina, they may have explained this a bajillion times before. Don't get offended if that's not something that they want to engage with. Again, you get tired. You get tired. There's no better way to say it. You get tired. So be willing, if you do want to know and you do actually care and want to be the ally to their group, to engage in that research yourself. And if you have further questions after doing your research, saying hey, this is what I found, this is what I'm seeing, but I'm not quite understanding X, Y, and Z, to reach out and say, could you maybe illuminate on this small point, if you feel comfortable doing so, because not everyone is not obligated to give you an answer as soon as you ask for it, especially if it's in the midst of a long Facebook comment. And if you show aggression and you don't understand and you're showing all of this malice that, you're not understanding it in the way that I should, that I am understanding, or you're not being civil in your discourse, for example. You're not, remain non-emotional or whatever as you're doing that. This is their life and their experience. Understand that they may have some emotion and experience that comes along with this entire life that they've lived up to this point of explaining this concept to you.
And it is valid.
So I'll end there.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Adriana, and thank you, Phil, for making this a fantastic show. Thank you to Jen Peeples.
Thank you.
Thank you to Tracie Harris.
Sure thing.
And thank you to the people on the other side of the wall over there. Normally it's Phil, but he's in here with us. So there they all are.
Oh, the
That's
people.
fantastic. Thank you, people.
Yeah,
Right
you were
on.
awesome, Adriana.
Right?
Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, what does it say? We love Godless Bitches. Yay! Thank you, Mark. We love you, Mark, for sure.
That's an honorary bitch for today.
Right.
Yes.
Damn.
Right. That's a good place to be. All right. So I have an announcement to make, and that is I am sorry to say that this will be the last Godless Bitches 2.0 show for Jen, Tracie, and me. There may be a Godless Bitches 3.0. I don't know, but this round is ending. This has been an amazing and gratifying experience for me, and I thank you for watching. I hope that what we have offered to you is educational and inspiring. I know that Jen and Tracie challenged me to think about issues in new and better ways, and I hope this show has challenged you in that same way. I hope that what we have presented here has led you to broaden your empathy and to be a better humanist. And remember that compassion can only happen between equals. And one more thing, we don't need a savior. We've got each other. It's all we've ever had and all we'll ever need. Bye.
Bye.